Hello and welcome back to the channel on our continuing voyage to become better blues players. My name's Mark, and in this video we are continuing our series on how to improvise blues. And we're now up to the topic of mixing major and minor. This is a big topic in the blues. It's a technique that's used by everyone, B.B. King, Eric Clapton, Stevie Ray Vaughan, I mean you name it, every blues master's used this technique one way or another. So we're going to cover this. We're going to actually split it over two videos because there's quite a bit to cover here. So what we're going to cover in this particular video is the fingerings and the general ideas behind it, and particularly when you can and can't use this technique, because there are certain circumstances where it's just not applicable. If you try and use it, it's not going to sound very good. There'll be an example where I'll show you how to then put this together over a backing track, and then at the end of the video there'll be a backing track. If you want to see the other videos in this blues improvisation series, check the description below, and it'll have the link to all the other videos in there. Okay, so let's first of all talk about the 12-bar blues chord progressions where you can and you can't use this technique. So if we think of our 12-bar blues, and we'll think of a 12-bar blues in A, you've got A, D, and E as the three chords, and I'll put a graphic on screen so you can actually see what I'm imagining in my head when I'm describing this. So you have 12-bar blues, and we're in the key of A. Now, if that A chord is any kind of minor chord, so an A minor 9, A minor 11, A minor 7, whatever it is. If it's any kind of minor chord, then we're really talking about a minor blues. And this technique doesn't apply to the minor blues. If you find yourself having to play over a minor blues, which is not, it's a great thing to play over, but if you play over a minor blues, do not try and mix major or minor, because it's going to sound pretty awful. You want to just stick to minor. A minor pentatonic would be great to use in that context. Don't try and mix in a major pentatonic, because it's going to sound like a bit of a mess. Okay, so as well as the 12-bar blues, a minor 12-bar blues, we've also got a dominant 12-bar blues. This is often mistakenly referred to as a major blues. People often talk about the difference between major blues and minor blues. When people generally talk about major blues, what they mean is a dominant blues. That's where your A chord is some kind of dominant chord, so it's an A7 or an A9. Now often, if you get a chord chart, it's just noted as an A. If it doesn't have if it's not a minor, if it's just noted as A without that minor being added to, if it's just A, you can consider it to be a dominant blues. People often use that just as the shorthand. So we're talking about an A chord, an A7, an A9, something like that. When you're playing over that type of 12-bar blues, you can use this technique. Okay, that's really important that you kind of get that distinction. Difference between a minor blues and a dominant blues. And as I say, dominant blues often mistakenly referred to as a major blues. And in fact, sometimes you turn up for a jam and somebody just says 12-bar blues in A. Well, they'll mean a dominant blues. If it's minor, they'll specify 12-bar blues in A minor. Okay, so if it doesn't have that minor thing, you can consider it dominant. Okay, so if it's one of the dominant, if you're playing over a dominant 12-bar, you can use this technique. And the technique is basically that over the A chords, bars 1 to 4, and then bars, what would that be, 7 and 8. So 1 to 4, 7 and 8, you can use a major pentatonic or a minor pentatonic, and you can move between them. But those other bars where we've got a D7 or an E7, over those you use a minor pentatonic. Okay, so you can use major or minor over the A chords, but the other chords just stick to using minor. I won't get into the details of exactly what the theory is behind that. This is something I have covered in previous lessons, so if you want to check those out, again, I'll put links in the description, which goes into it a little bit more. But basically, rule of thumb is over the A chords, you can use major or minor. Over the D and the E chords, just stick to using a minor pentatonic. Okay, so with all of that out the way, and I'm sorry that theory took quite so long, what is the A major pentatonic scale? Well, actually, if you take your A minor pentatonic scale that we've been using up to this point, and you take it three frets down. So we're actually, so it would be F sharp minor pentatonic, and you play it, you get this. Okay, and that is a major pentatonic, because A major and F sharp minor are exactly the same. They contain all the same notes. Again, I have other videos that cover the theory as to why that is. It's not just a coincidence. But if you want to play the major pentatonic, you just take wherever your minor pentatonic is, take it 3 frets down, and you've got the major version. Okay, the thing to note about this though is that your root note has changed position in the fingering. So if we think of that minor pentatonic fingering, when we play it as a minor pentatonic starting on the 5th fret, our root note is here, D string 7th fret, here, top E string 5th fret. Okay, I'm just playing with box position 1 for now. But when we play a major pentatonic, then our root note is now 2nd fret of the G string, or again it's 5th fret of the top E string, but now we're playing that as the top end of our pentatonic shape, if you kind of understand what I mean. So there's still A notes. The note that is the root note is still A. They just fall in at a different place in the pattern. I think that's what I'm trying to explain. And because of that, you have to treat them a little differently, because as we said in the previous videos, root note's where you're going to spend most of your time. It's where you're going to land on and settle for most of the time. But it's also the note that you don't bend. You can shake it to make it sound interesting, but don't try and give it any of those dirty bends. So that's just something to be aware of. Okay, so onto the example now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to play over a 12-bar blues backing track in A. And over the A chords, I'm going to use a major pentatonic. So that's the minor pentatonic shape flipped down 3 frets. And as we covered in the previous videos, I'm going to use box position 1 and box position 2 of those. So same shapes as we learned previously, it's just that with 3 frets down. Okay, and the interesting thing about that is box position 2 now of a major pentatonic, those that we learnt in, I think it was either the last lesson or the lesson before, now would be here. And they fall nicely under a minor pentatonic box position 1. Okay, so major pentatonic, minor pentatonic. Okay, and you should be able to hear the difference. One sounds sweet, one sounds sour. That's something kind of important to think about, and we'll come back into that when we come back in the next video in part 2. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll just improvise something now. I'll annotate what I'm doing on screen, and then we'll come back on the other side, talk about it, and then I'll set you an exercise where you then do the same thing. Okay, so I'll kick the backing track on, and we'll see how we go. Okay, so there you saw me playing. It wasn't the best playing I've ever done, but it kind of gets the idea across. Playing major pentatonic over the A chords, playing a minor pentatonic over the D and the E. Okay, and what you probably found is that it's quite obvious to hear the differences. I was trying to emphasize those differences as much as I can. To me, to my mind, playing that major pentatonic in that quite so obvious way, that to me sounds a little bit more Southern rock. Then when you get to minor pentatonic, it sounds a little bit more Chicago. It's kind of what my ears kind of hear it as. So what I'm going to do now is I will leave you with the backing track. I want you to practice that. Make sure that you can play those major pentatonic, A major pentatonic shapes and those notes first of all, and then have a go over the backing track. Interesting thing about when you do this, if you've never played major pentatonic before, it's a strange one because your fingers actually, you should already know the shape, because if you know a minor pentatonic, you just move it down 3 frets and your fingers know where to go. It's actually a mental change that you got to make to actually just see it that way and see where that root note is now in a slightly different place in the pattern. Anyway, so I'll leave you at the backing track. Have a go over it. Remember, a major pentatonic over the A chords and a minor pentatonic over the D and the G. Sorry, the D and the E chords. If you followed the previous lesson where we were actually following the chord progression around and changing chord, you should be able to hear those chord changes. This is the same backing track that I used in the previous lesson. So here it is. Enjoy the backing track. We'll come back with part 2 and we'll start to make this sound a little bit more interesting and flow together. Okay, so here's the backing track.